Paul Bernardo is one of Canada's most notorious serial killers. First known as the Scarborough Rapist, Bernardo began a series of rapes, assaults, and eventual murders with the kidnapping of school-aged girls. Paul Bernardo was born as Kenneth and Marilyn Bernardo's third child. Kenneth was abusive towards Marilyn and was charged in 1975 for child molestation. He also sexually abused Paul's sister, causing Marilyn to become depressed and withdraw from family life. Despite the fact that his mother banished herself to the basement of their Scarborough home, Paul was said to be a very happy child who was sweet and well-mannered. He wasn't old enough to understand what his mother was going through, unlike his older siblings. It wasn't until Paul was 16 years old that he found out that he was the child of his mother and her ex-boyfriend, a secret that his parents had kept from him since birth. After learning of his mother's unfaithfulness, Paul began openly referring to her as a whore or a slut. By the time Paul was attending college at the University of Toronto in Scarborough, he had developed dark sexual fantasies, enjoyed humiliating women in public, and continuously beat up the women that he dated. In October of 1997, when Paul was 23 years old, he met Karla Homolka, the woman that he would later marry. Despite there being a 6-year age gap between the two, with Paul having met Homolka when she was 17, Karla's parents approved and loved Paul from the very beginning. Unlike women that Bernardo had previously dated, Homolka encouraged his sadistic sexual behavior, later joining in on the acts that Bernardo carried out towards his victims. But Bernardo was not satisfied. During the early stages of his and Karla's relationship, Paul frequently stalked young women after they had exited buses and then raped the young girls in public, lasting from 30 minutes to 2 hours. He continually committed these acts, in total raping 11 women, and was now referred to as the Scarborough Rapist. While the police searched for a suspect, there were no suspicions that Paul was the one committing these acts. Paul was not even questioned, despite his Scarborough residency and a known past of domestic abuse, until his friends reported him as an almost identical match to the composite sketch drawn by the police. It wasn't until 2 months later that Bernardo was brought into the police station and interviewed by 2 detectives. Bernardo was brought back in for an investigation in November of 1990, where he was ordered to offer a DNA sample. After 35 minutes of questioning, police concluded that he was a well-educated and well-adjusted young man that could never have committed the rapes. Following this interview, Bernardo drove to St. Catharines and met with Homolka, pleading to her that he wasn't the Scarborough Rapist. In 1991, Bernardo moved permanently to St. Catharines so he could live with Homolka. At that time, the rapes in Scarborough had stopped. However, on April 6, 1991, Bernardo had committed his 12th rape in St. Catharines. At this point, Homolka knew about Paul being the Scarborough Rapist and began recruiting young girls that Bernardo could have sex with. By 1990, Bernardo had begun spending lots of time with Karla's family. He was engaged to Karla, but flirted constantly with the youngest daughter of the family, Tammy Homolka. He became obsessed with her, constantly peeping into her windows and even masturbating in her room while she slept. 6 months before their wedding in 1991, Karla stole anesthetic agent from the clinic she worked at. On December 23, 1990, Homolka and Bernardo administered sleeping pills to Tammy in a rum and eggnog cocktail. After Tammy was unconscious, Paul and Karla undressed her and Karla applied a halothane-soaked cloth to her sister's nose and mouth. Karla wanted to give Tammy's virginity to Bernardo for Christmas because Bernardo was disappointed by not having been Karla's first sex partner. With Tammy's parents sleeping upstairs, the pair filmed themselves as they raped her in the basement. Tammy began to vomit. The pair tried to revive her, then called 911, but not before they hid evidence, dressed Tammy, and moved her into the basement bedroom. A few hours later, Tammy was pronounced dead at St. Catharines Hospital without having regained consciousness. Paul and Karla's next victim was Leslie Mahaffey. On the morning of June 15, 1991, Bernardo abducted the 14-year-old, luring her to his car with cigarettes. Karla and Paul raped Leslie just like they did Tammy. After drugging her and blindfolding her unconscious body, the couple sexually abused Mahaffey and videotaped every second. When Mahaffey regained consciousness, Paul strangled her and the couple stashed her body in their basement. Bernardo and Homolka decided the best way to dispose of the evidence would be to dismember Leslie Mahaffey and encase each piece of her body in cement. Bernardo bought a dozen bags of cement at a hardware store the following day and kept all of the receipts, which would be bad for his trial in the future. Bernardo used his grandfather's circular saw to cut the body, and him and Homolka then made numerous trips to dump the cement blocks in Lake Gibson. At least one of the blocks weighed 200 pounds and proved beyond the pair's patience or abilities to sink. It rested near the shore, where a father and son on a fishing expedition discovered it on June 29, 1991. Leslie Mahaffey was discovered by her orthodontic appliance. Paul and Carla's next victim was Kristen French. On the afternoon of April 16, 1992, Bernardo and Homolka were driving through St. Catharines to look for potential victims. Carla pretended that she was a tourist looking for directions, and they abducted 15-year-old student Kristen French. French took the same route home every day, taking about 15 minutes to get home in order to attend to her dog's needs. Soon after she would have arrived, her parents became convinced that she had met with foul play and notified police. Within 24 hours, there was a search team looking for her. Over the 3 days of Easter weekend, Bernardo and Homolka videotaped themselves as they tortured, raped, and sodomized Kristen French, forcing her to drink large amounts of alcohol and to behave submissively to Bernardo. The following day, the couple murdered French before going to Homolka's for Easter dinner. Homolka testified at her trial that Bernardo had strangled French for exactly 7 minutes while she watched. French's nude body was found in a ditch on April 30th, 1992, approximately 45 minutes from St. Catharines, where the hair had been cut off. On December 27, 1992, Paul severely beat Carla in the head, face, and limbs with a flashlight. She claimed that she was in a car accident, even though she was severely bruised, and went to work the next day. Her skeptical coworkers called her parents, and her parents forced her to file charges against Bernardo. He was arrested, but later released. 26 months after Bernardo submitted a DNA sample, Toronto police were informed that it matched that of the Scarborough rapist and immediately placed him under 24-hour surveillance. On February 9, 1993, Homolka was interviewed and only told the police about her abuses suffered from Bernardo. Later that night, she told her aunt and uncle that Bernardo was the Scarborough rapist and that her and Bernardo were involved in the rape and murder of Mahaffey and French, and that the rapes were recorded on videotape. Carla was granted legal immunity for her cooperation with the cops. On February 17th, Paul was arrested and a search warrant was obtained for his house to find the videos that Carla had told the police about. They only found one video with Carla performing oral sex on an earlier rape victim. So on May 5th, she was given the opportunity to obtain a plea bargain, which offered her 12 years in prison. If she declined, the government would charge her with 2 counts of first-degree murder, so she accepted, and on May 14th, she began telling the police about all of Paul's previous rapes. Bernardo was tried for the murders of French and Mahaffey in 1995, and his trial included detailed testimony from Homolka and videotapes of the rapes. On September 1st, 1995, Bernardo was convicted of a number of offenses, including the 2 first-degree murders and 2 aggravated sexual assaults, and sentenced to life in prison without parole for at least 25 years. He was designated a dangerous offender, making him unlikely to ever be released. While in the segregation unit at Kingston Penitentiary, Paul faced harassment and was attacked and punched in the face in 1996 by another inmate. In June of 1999, 5 convicts tried to storm his segregation unit, and a riot squad used gas to disperse them. Paul was unable to apply for parole until 2008, but he didn't do so until 2015. The jury found that he was a dangerous offender, and it was most likely considered that he would never be allowed out of jail. It wasn't until February 17, 2018, that he was able to apply for full parole, but he was also denied this because he's a dangerous dude. Paul remains in jail while Homolka was released in 2006. She now still lives in Canada with a new husband and 3 young children.